Sarah Chen stood in her pristine kitchen on a Sunday morning, carefully writing down instructions on a yellow notepad while her family slept upstairs. The early March sunlight streamed through the windows of their Seattle home, highlighting the worry lines on her face. At 42, she had never spent more than a week away from her family. The opportunity had come unexpectedly. Her company, Meyer Pharmaceuticals, had selected her to lead a groundbreaking cancer research team in Basel. The position meant career advancement, better pay, and international recognition in her field. However, the thought of leaving her husband Michael and their two teenagers, Jason, 15, and Emma, 13, made her stomach twist with anxiety. Everything will be fine, Michael had assured her repeatedly over the past week. He worked from home as a software developer, which meant he could manage the household and keep an eye on the kids. But Sarah knew her husband's tendency to become absorbed in his work, often forgetting basic things like grocery shopping or paying the utility bills on time. Sarah moved through the house, double-checking every room. The calendar on the refrigerator was marked with everyone's schedules: Jason's basketball practices, Emma's piano lessons, dental appointments, and parent-teacher conferences. She had even color-coded each activity and placed sticky notes with additional reminders beside them. In the laundry room, she had labeled different baskets for whites, colors, and delicates, with detailed instructions taped to the wall about water temperature and proper detergent measurements. The freezer was stocked with pre-made meals, each container marked with heating instructions. She had even created a spreadsheet of emergency contacts, including neighbors, relatives, and family doctors. As Sarah checked her lists one final time, she heard footsteps on the stairs. Emma appeared in her purple pajamas, her long black hair tangled from sleep. "Mom, are you still making lists?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. "You've been at it since yesterday." Sarah pulled her daughter into a tight hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I just want to make sure everything runs smoothly while I'm gone," she explained, trying to keep her voice steady. More footsteps followed as Jason and Michael joined them in the kitchen. Michael, still in his worn gray robe, started the coffee maker while Jason slumped into a chair, looking at his phone. The scene was so normal, so everyday, that Sarah felt her heart ache knowing she wouldn't be part of it for months. "Mom, we're not little kids anymore," Jason said, looking up from his device. "We can take care of ourselves. Dad's here too, you know." Michael walked over and wrapped an arm around Sarah's shoulders. "He's right, honey. We'll manage. This is a huge opportunity for you, and we're all proud of you." Sarah nodded, but continued organizing. She spent the rest of the morning showing them where she had stored everything, explaining her systems, and making them promise to follow her instructions. Her family listened patiently, exchanging knowing looks when they thought she wasn't watching. As evening approached, Sarah finished packing her suitcases. She had prepared for every possible scenario: formal clothes for meetings, casual wear for weekends, medications, adapters for Swiss electrical outlets, and multiple copies of important documents. Her laptop was loaded with photos of her family, and she had already downloaded various video chat applications. At dinner, she tried to memorize every detail: the way Emma picked at her vegetables, Jason's dramatic stories about school, and Michael's gentle smile across the table. The thought of missing 6 months of these moments made her question her decision, but she knew this opportunity could lead to breakthrough treatments that might help countless cancer patients. Later that night, after the kids had gone to bed, Sarah sat with Michael on their back porch. The Seattle skyline twinkled in the distance, and a cool breeze carried the scent of blooming cherry blossoms from their garden. "Promise me you'll call if anything goes wrong," Sarah said, clutching her cup of tea. "Even if it's small, I want to know everything." Michael took her hand, his familiar touch comforting. "I promise. But you need to promise something too. Promise you'll focus on your research and not worry too much about us. We'll be right here waiting when you get back." Sarah leaned against his shoulder, trying to believe his words. She couldn't shake the feeling that something would go wrong, but she pushed the thought away. Tomorrow would come too soon, and with it, the longest separation her family had ever faced. For now, she just wanted to sit here with her husband, listening to the quiet sounds of their sleeping home, pretending tomorrow was just another day. 2 months into Sarah's assignment in Switzerland, the first signs of trouble began to surface, but she was too far away to notice their full significance. The weekly family video calls, which had started as hour-long conversations full of laughter and updates, gradually shortened to 20 minutes, then to brief 10-minute check-ins. On this particular Sunday evening in Basel, Sarah sat in her small apartment, waiting for her family's usual 9 p.m. call. The time difference meant it was morning in Seattle, and she had grown accustomed to seeing her family at their breakfast table, still in their pajamas. But today, like the past 3 Sundays, the call was running late. When the video finally connected, Sarah's heart sank slightly. Only Michael appeared on screen, looking tired and unshaven. His usual crisp button-down shirts had been replaced by an old t-shirt with what appeared to be coffee stains. "Where are the kids?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice light. "Jason's at a friend's house for a school project, and Emma's still sleeping," Michael explained, running a hand through his unkempt hair. "You know how teenagers are on weekends." Sarah noticed dishes piled in the sink behind him. Her normally fastidious husband had always been particular about kitchen cleanliness. The calendar she had so carefully organized was no longer visible on the refrigerator. "How's work going?" she asked, attempting to maintain their connection. Michael's eyes shifted away from the screen. "Same as usual. Busy with deadlines." He paused, checking his phone. "Listen, Sarah, I need to cut this short. I have a meeting in 15 minutes. "On Sunday morning?" Sarah questioned. "International client," he responded quickly. "Different time zones? You know how it is." After they hung up, Sarah opened her email. Emma, who used to send daily messages about school and friends, hadn't written in 2 weeks. Jason's last email was a brief "everything's fine," Mom sent 10 days ago. Even Michael's usual goodnight texts had become sporadic and short. Sarah opened their joint banking app, something she'd been doing more frequently lately. New charges appeared that didn't fit their normal patterns. Multiple late-night food deliveries, purchases from liquor stores, and an unusual number of ride-share services. When she texted Michael about these, his responses were vague. Had some friends over, or been working late. That evening, her mother-in-law, Linda, called unexpectedly. "Sarah, dear, how's Switzerland?" "It's fine," Sarah replied, noting the concern in Linda's voice. "Is everything okay at home?" "Oh, yes, Linda said too quickly. "I just wanted to check in. I've been dropping by the house more often to help with the cleaning and cooking. You know how men can be when left to manage a household." Sarah's stomach tightened. Linda had never needed to help with housework before. Michael had always been capable of managing things. "Is Michael okay?" she asked directly. "He's just been busy with work," Linda answered after a slight pause. "The kids are doing well in school. Emma's piano teacher mentioned she missed a few lessons, but that's normal for teenagers, isn't it?" After hanging up, Sarah sat at her small desk, staring at the family photo she'd brought with her. It had been taken last Christmas. Everyone smiling, Michael's arm around her shoulders, the kids making funny faces. Now, just a few months later, something felt off, but she couldn't quite piece it together. She opened her work laptop, trying to focus on the research data that had brought her here. The project was going exceptionally well. Her team had made several breakthrough discoveries that could revolutionize cancer treatment. Her supervisors were already hinting at a permanent position in Switzerland, with a significant promotion. But as Sarah reviewed the data, her mind kept wandering to the subtle changes at home. Michael's disheveled appearance, the missing calendar, Emma's missed piano lessons, Jason's increasing absences during video calls, the unusual bank charges, Linda's unexpected involvement in household management. She considered flying home for a quick visit, but her next project milestone was just weeks away. Michael had insisted everything was fine, and she needed to trust him. After all, he was a responsible adult, and the kids were old enough to take care of themselves. Still, as she prepared for bed that night, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. She sent a quick text to Michael. "Miss you all. Everything okay?" His response came hours later, just 2 words that did nothing to ease her growing concern. "All good." By the 4th month of Sarah's stay in Switzerland, the changes back home became impossible to ignore. One rainy evening in Basel, as she reviewed her team's latest research findings, her phone lit up with a call from her neighbor, Mrs. Peterson. "Sarah, dear," the elderly woman's voice crackled through the line. "I hope I'm not disturbing you, but I thought you should know that your garden is completely withered." Those beautiful roses you spent years nurturing, they're all gone. Sarah's hand tightened around her phone. The garden had been her pride and joy, and Michael had promised to follow her detailed care instructions. Have you seen Michael or the kids recently? She asked carefully. Well, Mrs. Peterson hesitated. I see different cars parked outside your house late at night. And last week, I heard loud music around midnight. I tried calling your house, but no one answered. After thanking Mrs. Peterson, Sarah immediately checked their home security app. The camera footage showed multiple unfamiliar cars in their driveway over the past weeks. She noticed Jason sneaking out late at night and Emma coming home from school looking dejected, often alone. Most concerning was Michael's behavior. The cameras caught him pacing the backyard at odd hours, talking on his phone with agitated gestures. He looked thinner, his clothes hanging loosely on his frame. One recording showed him accepting a large package from a courier at 2 a.m. Sarah's mother called Mex, her voice tight with worry. Honey, I ran into Emma at the grocery store yesterday. She was buying microwave dinners and said she's been cooking for herself lately. Where's Michael? He's working from home, Mom, Sarah replied, though uncertainty crept into her voice. He told me everything's fine. Sarah, her mother paused, choosing her words carefully. I drove by your house this morning. There were empty bottles in the recycling bin. A lot of them. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She logged into their joint email account, something she rarely did. There, she found dozens of unopened messages, overdue utility notices, missed payment reminders, and most alarmingly, an email from Michael's company dated 2 months ago, a termination notice. With shaking hands, Sarah checked their bank statements again. The mysterious charges had increased. More liquor store visits, expensive electronics purchases, and large cash withdrawals. Their savings account, which had held their children's college fund, showed a significant decrease. She tried calling Michael, but it went straight to voicemail. She texted both children. To Jason, hey sweetie, how are you really doing? To Emma, baby, I miss you. Is everything okay at home? Jason's reply came hours later. Stop worrying, Mom. I'm handling things. Emma's response broke Sarah's heart. I stay at Aunt Linda's house most nights now. That's not doing so good. Sarah immediately called Linda, who finally revealed the truth. Michael had lost his job 3 months ago but hadn't told anyone initially. He'd been acting strangely, staying in his home office for days, claiming to work but actually spending hours on gambling websites. The children had been covering for him, trying to protect Sarah from worrying about problems at home while she worked on her important research. Linda, why didn't anyone tell me? Sarah's voice cracked. Michael made us promise not to worry you, Linda explained softly. He said he could fix things before you came back. But Sarah, it's getting worse. He's not himself anymore. Sarah spent the night reviewing her project status and speaking with her superiors in Switzerland. Her research was crucial, with millions of dollars in funding and potential benefits for countless cancer patients. Leaving now could jeopardize everything she worked for. But as she watched recent footage from their home security camera, showing Michael sitting alone in the dark living room, surrounded by takeout containers and empty bottles, while their children stayed with relatives, she knew what she had to do. She booked a flight home for the following week, planning to surprise them. Her family needed her more than her research did. However, she had no idea that what she would find upon her return would be far worse than anything she had imagined from these warning signs. As she packed her bags that night, Sarah's phone buzzed with a final text from Jason. Mom, whatever happens, please don't hate Dad. He's trying his best. Sarah sat in her Basel apartment, staring at her computer screen as her research team celebrated around her. They had achieved a major breakthrough 2 weeks ahead of schedule, successfully completing the critical phase of their cancer treatment study. Her colleagues were opening champagne, but Sarah's thoughts were thousands of miles away. Dr. Chen, this is incredible. Her supervisor, Dr. Mueller, beamed at her. With these results, we can move forward much faster than anticipated. Your 6-month commitment might end 3 weeks early. The news should have thrilled her, but Sarah could only think about the increasingly disturbing signs from home. This morning, she had received a strange call from Emma's school counselor. Mrs. Chen, we've been trying to reach your husband, the counselor had said. Emma's grades have dropped significantly, and she's fallen asleep in class several times. When we asked, she said she's been staying up late to make sure her father takes his medicine. We're concerned. Medicine? Sarah had asked, her heart racing. What medicine? The counselor had paused awkwardly. Oh, I assumed you knew. Perhaps you should speak with your husband. Now, as her colleagues celebrated around her, Sarah made a decision. She wouldn't wait 3 more weeks. Pulling up her airline's website, she booked a flight for 3 days later. She hadn't told her family about the project's early completion, and something told her not to mention her early return. The next day, Sarah met with Dr. Mueller to explain her situation. The kind-faced Swiss doctor listened patiently as Sarah shared her concerns about the troubling signs from home. Family comes first, he said, understanding. We can handle the final documentation. You've done exceptional work here, Dr. Chen. The position in our permanent research division remains open if you want it. Sarah spent her last 2 days in Switzerland preparing detailed handover notes and organizing her research data. She also made several calls to her mother, asking her to check on the house without telling anyone, to Emma's piano teacher, who revealed that her daughter hadn't attended lessons in over 2 months, and to Jason's basketball coach, who mentioned that he had quit the team weeks ago. Each new piece of information felt like another weight on her chest. The final straw came when she called their family doctor, Dr. Roberts, who had treated them for 15 years. Sarah, he said gravely, I prescribed Michael antidepressants last month. He came in after an incident. I legally can't share more details, but I strongly suggest you come home soon. The night before her flight, Sarah couldn't sleep. She paced her small apartment, checking her phone repeatedly. Michael had stopped responding to her messages 2 days ago. Emma's last text was cryptic. Dad's sleeping a lot. Don't worry. Jason had only sent a thumbs-up emoji to her questions about school. She logged into their home security system one last time. The latest footage showed their once beautiful house looking neglected. Newspapers piled up on the porch. The lawn was overgrown. Through the windows, she could see lights on at strange hours, shadows moving about when everyone should have been asleep. At the airport the next morning, Sarah's hands shook as she checked in her luggage. She had arranged for a taxi to pick her up in Seattle, not wanting to burden her family or alert them to her early return. Her mother had offered to meet her, but Sarah had declined, needing to see the situation for herself first. During the long flight, Sarah tried to piece together the timeline. Michael's job loss, the unexplained medicines, Emma's declining grades, Jason's withdrawal from basketball, the strange bank charges, the late-night activities, and the family's increasing reluctance to communicate with her. What had happened to her once stable home? As the plane began its descent into Seattle, Sarah stared out the window at the familiar landscape below. Somewhere down there, her family was falling apart, and she hadn't been there to stop it. The guilt, worry, and fear she'd been suppressing for months threatened to overwhelm her. The captain announced their arrival time, 2:15 p.m. local time. In less than an hour, she would be home, facing whatever awaited her. Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to prepare herself for what she might find. But nothing could have prepared her for the reality that awaited her at 4726 Maple Street. The taxi pulled up to 4726 Maple Street at 3:30 p.m., and Sarah's heart sank at her first glimpse of her home. The once pristine white house looked gray and neglected. Dead leaves from last autumn still cluttered the flower beds she had so carefully tended. The brass house numbers, which Michael used to polish every month, were tarnished and hanging crooked. As she paid the driver and retrieved her luggage, Sarah noticed Mrs. Peterson peering through her curtains next door. The elderly neighbor quickly appeared on her porch, wringing her hands. "Oh, Sarah," she called out softly. "Thank goodness you're home. I've been so worried. Michael, he hasn't been himself." Sarah nodded, wheeling her suitcase up the cracked driveway. Empty pizza boxes were stacked beside overflowing garbage bins. The recycling container spilled over with bottles, not just beer, but hard liquor. Some looked fresh. Using her key, Sarah opened the front door. The smell hit her first, a mixture of stale air, unwashed dishes, and something else she couldn't identify. The entrance hall, once bright and welcoming, was dark. Mail cascaded from the small table where they used to keep their keys neatly arranged. "Hello," she called out. "Michael? Kids?" No answer. The silence felt heavy, oppressive. Sarah moved through the house, each room revealing new horrors. The living room couch was buried under unwashed clothes. Gaming controllers, empty energy drink cans, and takeout containers littered the floor. The TV was on but muted, playing some daytime show to an empty room. In the kitchen, dishes filled not only the sink but covered every counter surface. The refrigerator hummed loudly, a sound it never made before. When she opened it, she found only condiments, old takeout boxes, and several six-packs of beer. The freezer meals she prepared months ago were gone, the containers stacked unwashed in a corner. Sarah's hands trembled as she climbed the stairs. Emma's room was empty, the bed unslept in. Textbooks lay scattered across the floor, some marked with failed test scores. A calendar on her wall showed piano lessons crossed out, week after week. Jason's room was worse. The air was stale, the blinds drawn. His school backpack hadn't been touched in what looked like weeks, gathering dust in the corner. His basketball uniform was crumpled in the trash can. On his desk, she found crumpled papers, overdue notices from school, and a suspension warning for excessive absences. But it was the master bedroom that broke her. Michael lay across their bed, fully clothed in wrinkled business attire, snoring heavily at 3 in the afternoon. Empty bottles lined the nightstand. His laptop lay open, displaying a gambling website's login page. Several pill bottles were scattered nearby, prescriptions she'd never seen before. Sarah picked up one bottle, antidepressants. Another was for anxiety. A third for sleep. All prescribed within the last 2 months. As she set them down, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Michael's wedding ring lay discarded next to the pills. Her hands shaking, Sarah opened their closet. Michael's suits, which he'd always kept perfectly pressed, hung wrinkled and stained. Some still had price tags, expensive brands they couldn't afford. Below them, hidden behind shoes, she found more bottles and wadded-up papers. She smoothed one out, a final warning notice from their mortgage company. Sarah sank to the floor, overwhelmed. Her phone buzzed, a text from Emma. At Aunt Linda's house. Dad said he was working today. Is he? Before she could reply, another message came through, this time from Jason. Mom, Mrs. Peterson just texted that you're home. Don't wake Dad up. He had a rough night. I'm at Kevin's house. We should talk first. The sound of breaking glass downstairs made Sarah jump. She hurried down to find Michael stumbling in the kitchen, trying to clean up a broken bottle. He looked up at her, his eyes unfocused and bloodshot. For a moment, he stared as if seeing the ghost. Sarah, he slurred. You're not supposed to be here yet. I was going to fix everything before you came back. I was going to make it all perfect again. Sarah watched as her husband, the strong, confident man she'd left behind 4 months ago, began to cry, still clutching broken glass in his bleeding hands. The scene before her confirmed her worst fears. Her family hadn't just been struggling, they had completely fallen apart. Sarah carefully took the broken glass from Michael's bleeding hands and guided him to sit at the kitchen table. His eyes were red and unfocused, his usually clean-shaven face covered in several days' worth of stubble. She found the first aid kit exactly where she'd left it months ago and began cleaning his cuts. When did you lose your job? She asked quietly, applying antiseptic to his wounds. Michael stared at the floor, his shoulders slumped. 3 months ago, the company was downsizing. I thought I could find another position before you needed to know. His voice cracked. I had savings. I had interviews lined up. Everything was under control. What happened? Sarah pressed bandages to his palms, noting how thin his wrists had become. The interviews went nowhere. Each rejection hit harder than the last. Michael's words came out in a rush now. I started having panic attacks. Couldn't sleep. The doctor prescribed something to help, but it made me feel foggy. I tried online gambling to make up for the lost income. Won a few times at first, then, he gestured helplessly at their surroundings. Just then, the front door opened. Jason entered cautiously, followed by Emma. Both teenagers froze at the sight of their parents in the kitchen. Emma's eyes were red from crying, and Jason looked much older than his 15 years. Mom, Emma whispered, then ran into Sarah's arms. Jason stayed back, his face a mask of contained anger. Why didn't anyone tell me? Sarah asked, holding her daughter close. Because you were doing important work, Jason answered, his voice hard. Dad made us promise not to worry you. He said he could handle it. But then he started drinking and gambling, and Emma had to stay at Aunt Linda's because he wouldn't get out of bed some days, and I had to. He stopped, choking back emotions. You had to what, Jason? Sarah prompted gently. I had to be the adult, he exploded. I had to make sure Emma ate, that the utilities stayed on, that Dad didn't. He glanced at his father and fell silent. Michael looked up, his face twisted with shame. That I didn't hurt myself, he finished quietly. One night, about a month ago, I was in a really dark place. Jason found me in the garage. He's the one who called Dr. Roberts. Sarah felt her knees weaken. She sat down heavily, still holding Emma. Why didn't my mother say anything? Or Linda? Dad threatened to disappear if they told you. Emma mumbled into Sarah's shoulder. He said he'd rather be gone than have you see him like this. So everyone tried to handle it quietly, hoping he'd get better. The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Through the window, Sarah could see Mrs. Peterson in her garden, pretending not to watch their house while clearly keeping an eye out. I've been tracking the gambling, Jason said suddenly, pulling out his phone. He's lost most of the savings, but I managed to move some money to a separate account before he could get to it. I've been using it for groceries and Emma's needs. Sarah stared at her son, seeing for the first time the toll that responsibility had taken on him. His childhood had been stripped away in a matter of months. The credit card companies have been calling, Emma added, and the bank left messages about the mortgage. Michael put his head in his bandaged hands. I've ruined everything, he whispered. The house, our savings, the kids' college funds. I was supposed to take care of them while you were gone, and instead, I destroyed our family. Sarah looked around at her broken family, her depressed, unemployed husband, her son forced to become the family protector, her daughter shuttling between homes to avoid the chaos. The weight of her absence pressed down on her chest. She had been pursuing professional success while her family crumbled. We need help, she said firmly. All of us. This isn't something we can fix alone. But your research, Michael started. Can wait. Sarah cut him off. I'm calling Dr. Roberts to get you into proper treatment. Then we're going to meet with a financial advisor to assess the damage. Jason, you're going back to being a teenager, no more adult responsibilities. Emma, you're coming home. We'll face this together. As she pulled out her phone to make the calls, Sarah realized this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but she wouldn't leave them again. Sometimes success meant knowing which battles were most important to fight. The next few days passed in a blur of appointments and revelations. Sarah sat in Dr. Roberts' office with Michael, listening as he diagnosed her husband with severe depression and anxiety disorder. The doctor explained how Michael's job loss had triggered a downward spiral, made worse by his attempts to hide it. Many men, especially primary breadwinners, experience deep shame when they lose their jobs. Dr. Roberts explained, while Michael stared at his hands. The gambling and drinking were attempts to self-medicate and chase losses, but now that everything's in the open, we can start proper treatment. Later that same day, Sarah met with their bank manager, Mr. Thompson. The financial damage was severe but not irreparable. Jason's quick thinking had saved some money, but they had still lost nearly 60% of their savings. 3 mortgage payments were overdue, and credit card debt had piled up. The house isn't in foreclosure yet, Mr. Thompson said kindly. If we can arrange a payment plan, and you can make steady payments, you might be able to keep it. Sarah's mother and Linda came over to help clean the house. As they worked, they shared their side of the story. They had noticed Michael's decline but felt trapped by his threats to disappear if they told Sarah. We thought we were protecting everyone, Linda explained, wiping tears as she sorted through weeks of unopened mail. Michael was so desperate to fix things before you returned. He kept saying he just needed more time. Emma's school principal was understanding when Sarah explained the situation. They arranged for Emma to make up her missed work and get extra tutoring. The piano teacher offered to restart lessons at a reduced rate, saying music might help Emma process her emotions. Jason's situation was more complicated. His grades had suffered, and the basketball coach was hesitant to let him rejoin the team mid-season. But when Sarah explained how her son had essentially been running the household, the coach's attitude changed. That kind of responsibility and dedication, That's exactly what we need on our team, the coach said. Tell him he can come back to practice whenever he's ready. The hardest meeting was with Michael's former employer. Sarah went alone, hoping to understand what had happened. The HR director explained that Michael had been part of a large layoff, but he'd been offered a severance package and job placement services. He had never responded to their emails or calls. We found these in his desk drawer, the HR director said, handing Sarah a stack of unpaid bills and gambling receipts. We tried to reach out, but he'd already cleared out his office and blocked our numbers. At home, Sarah found Michael sitting in their garden, attempting to revive her dead roses. His hands were dirty, and for the first time in months, he was sober and clear-eyed, thanks to his new medication. I kept meaning to water them, he said without looking up. Every day, I'd think about it, but just getting out of bed felt impossible. Then when they died, it felt like another failure. Like I was killing everything you loved. Sarah sat beside him in the dirt. Plants can grow back, she said softly. So can we. That evening, they held their first family meeting in months. Around the kitchen table, each person shared their feelings openly. Emma talked about her fear of coming home to find her father unconscious. Jason admitted his anger at having to grow up too fast. Michael apologized repeatedly, his voice breaking as he acknowledged how his actions had affected everyone. Sarah listened to it all, her heart aching for the pain her family had endured. But beneath the hurt, she saw something else: resilience. Emma had maintained her gentle spirit despite everything. Jason had shown incredible strength and maturity, and Michael, though broken, was finally asking for help. We need rules going forward, Sarah said when everyone had spoken. Complete honesty, no matter how difficult. Regular family meetings. And most importantly, we face problems together. She laid out their new reality. Michael would attend daily therapy and addiction meetings. The kids would return to focusing on school and their activities. Sarah had arranged to work remotely for a pharmaceutical company in Seattle, turning down the prestigious position in Switzerland. As they talked into the night, making plans and setting boundaries, Sarah realized that healing wouldn't happen quickly. Trust had been broken, habits had formed, and wounds were still fresh. But sitting there with her family, watching them take the first steps toward recovery, she knew they would make it through together. 6 months after Sarah's return, signs of healing began to show in the Chen household. The autumn morning light streamed through freshly cleaned windows as Sarah stood in her restored garden, admiring the new rose bushes she and Michael had planted together. They weren't as grand as her previous garden. These flowers held special meaning. They represented their family's fresh start. Michael, now 4 months sober, stepped out onto the porch with 2 cups of coffee. He looked healthier, having regained some weight, and his eyes had lost their haunted look. His new job at a smaller software company paid less than his previous position, but it came with something more valuable: understanding colleagues and a supportive environment. First group presentation today, Sarah asked, accepting the coffee. Michael nodded, adjusting his tie. Nervous, but Dr. Roberts gave me some techniques to manage the anxiety, and my team knows about my recovery. They've been incredibly supportive. Inside, Emma practiced piano, the melodies flowing through the open windows. Her grades had improved dramatically, and she'd started counseling to process the trauma of the past year. The piano, once a source of stress, had become her emotional outlet. Jason came downstairs, wearing his basketball jersey. The team had welcomed him back, and though they hadn't made it to the championships, his coach had named him team captain for the upcoming season. More importantly, he was slowly learning to be a teenager again, though Sarah often caught him unconsciously checking on his sister and father. Family breakfast, Jason asked, dropping his gym bag by the door. These shared meals had become sacred in the Chen household, a daily reminder of their commitment to staying connected. As they sat around the kitchen table, Sarah noticed small but significant changes. The cabinet that once held liquor now stored Michael's collection of sobriety chips. The gambling apps were gone from everyone's phones, replaced by a family budgeting app they all shared. Bills were paid on time, and though their savings were still depleted, they had started a modest recovery fund. I got an email from Basil yesterday, Sarah mentioned carefully, watching her family's reactions. They're still interested in having me consult on the project remotely. 6 months ago, this news would have triggered panic. Now, Michael reached for her hand. You should do it. We're stronger now. Dad's right, Emma added. Besides, you'll be here with us while doing it. The conversation shifted to their upcoming weekend plans. They had started a tradition of Sunday family projects, sometimes helping at the local food bank, other times working on home repairs together. This weekend, they would repaint the house exterior, a symbol of their renewed pride in their home. After breakfast, as everyone prepared to leave for their respective days, Sarah checked their family calendar, not the old one she'd left behind, but a new digital version they all contributed to. It showed Michael's therapy appointments, Emma's piano recital, Jason's basketball games, and their family counseling sessions. Almost forgot, Michael said, pulling an envelope from his briefcase. Latest credit report. We're making progress. Sarah smiled, remembering their financial advisor's recent praise. Through careful budgeting and Michael's dedication to his payment plan, they had started rebuilding their credit. The house was secure now, and though it would take years to recover their full savings, they were on the right path. As she watched her family head out, Michael to work, Jason to basketball practice, Emma to school, Sarah reflected on how close they had come to losing everything. The prestigious position in Switzerland, which had once seemed like her dream job, now felt less important than the work she'd done here, helping rebuild her family. Her phone buzzed with a text from their family group chat. Emma, love you all. Don't forget, family movie night. Jason, my pick this time. No more documentaries, Dad. Michael, one day you'll appreciate the History Channel, son. Proud of you all. Sarah added her own heart emoji to the chat, then walked through their home, not perfect, but healing. Photos on the walls now included recent memories. Michael receiving his 6-month sobriety chip, Emma at her comeback recital, Jason's team captain ceremony. Among them hung the simple frame containing the family rules they'd written together that first night. 1. Honesty always. 2. Ask for help. 3. Support each other. 4. Remember how far we've come. 5. Love unconditionally. The journey wasn't over, but they were walking it together. Sometimes, Sarah realized, life's greatest achievements aren't found in research laboratories or corporate offices, but in the quiet victories of a family finding its way back to each other.